What is up, my friends? Thank you so much for having me back. I want to thank Austin Hull from Make Pop Music, the owner of this channel, for giving me a chance to jump back on here again. It's been a pleasure to work with him. And, just to give my perspective on like orchestral music or maybe music theory or anything like that, it's always a lot of fun to share what I can with you guys here on this channel. So again, I'm super pleased and I'm very happy to do a video here on orchestral pop music today, and it's super fun because like it's December, it's kind of that time of the year where, especially I guess if you live in Canada or any snowy places, we're kind of feeling those vibes. So just to give you a little bit of a detail into this project I want to share with you, basically it was a pop song I was hired to orchestrate and produce and mix and master. Basically the client already had produced a version of this song, and then she sent it to me to do like a new arrangement for it, basically to make it even more Christmassy. So I want to kind of go into the instrumentation and the instrument choices that I went with for this arrangement, but I kind of want to give you a listen and a playthrough of maybe the whole thing, just so you can get a sense of what it sounds like, and then we'll talk about some of the decision making behind it. Before we do that though, I want to give you a little bit of a gift for watching this video. It's my 3 components to an orchestral pop song. I think these are very important things that you need to know if you are interested in producing orchestral music or orchestral pop music in general. 3 really, really crucial things that you need to look out for in pretty much any production you're working on. So it kind of contains my personal approach to, I guess, writing with orchestral instruments. They're more like general topics that you just want to keep in mind. So it's an absolutely free guide that you can download in the description box below. But without further ado, let's get into the song. So let me just play through it and give you a sense of what it sounds like.
Up ahead is the glow of your firelight. Snow's in my boots, but it's alright. I see that star on your Christmas tree. Now I'm exactly where I wanna be, and in a while by the fire of the shimmering light. The only present that I need tonight is you and me, singing Old Frosty the Snowman. Right here, this is Christmas with you. This is Christmas, the day that we show the love that just glows. The gift that is Christmas, my wish for this Christmas is all I hold dear, is kept safe right here. This is Christmas. Your voice is the candle that just melts my heart. A blizzard couldn't keep our mittens apart. I like hanging ornaments with you, 'cause every season that's just what we do. And when you smile, all these twinkle lights turn fireworks that snuggle close under a warm patchwork. And baby, while we watch, it's a wonderful light. It just reminds us where we are tonight. Right here, this is Christmas with you. This is Christmas, the day that we show the love that just glows. The gift that is Christmas, my wish for this Christmas is all I hold dear, is kept safe right here. All our dreams grew silver wings. Let's fly up high, ride this comet tonight. We'll dash away, don't need one thing but you and me, baby, like popcorn on a string, singing that old song. Right here, this is Christmas with you. This is Christmas, the day that we show the love that just glows. Right here, this is Christmas with you. This is Christmas, the day that we show the love that just glows. Right here,
All right, so that is the song. So let's get into a bit about like the instrumentation and the decision making behind some of these instruments. So for me, as an orchestral producer, I tend to think of, instead of synths and pads, I tend to think of strings and maybe woodwinds and the brass instruments. And for me, that makes my life actually a lot simpler because the orchestra contains 4 different sections: strings, woodwinds, brass, and percussion. And usually when we're talking about orchestral pop, we're talking about strings mainly, right? Sometimes you'll see brass or woodwinds if it's a little bit more cinematic or you need some extra colors. But in general, we're talking about strings because they're so versatile and they can do so many things. I mean, just think about, like, when you think about the word orchestra, what do you think about first? Usually it's going to be the strings, right? So I kind of made the strings a priority in this song, in this arrangement. And let's have a listen to a couple of these examples. If I'm just going to pull up Contact here, because Contact is my sampler of choice. I've been using it for many years, so I kind of know it the best out of any sampler. So just to give you an idea of what we're working with here, the short strings, I've kind of set up a little pattern here. So it sounds like this. So here we have the contemporary string spiccato from Afflatus Chapter 1 strings. You can hear they kind of give this biting short sound, and that's what I really wanted. At the same time, I wanted these string sustains in the Cinematic Studio Strings light ensemble patch. So already in these 2 patches, you can hear how the frequency spectrum is already being filled up, right? We have short articulations, we have longer articulations, and that kind of gives us a good foundation already. So let's hear what it would sound like if we took out the short articulations. Now you hear the piano in there doing staccato chords at the top, which is very light, but it's still missing something. Put them back in. Suddenly it's filled in a little bit more, right? In addition to that, I'm also layering in what I call passion strings, which is just an additional like melodic violin layer on top. So with a combination of these tracks, we have the short strings, string sustains. Let's put in the passion strings as well. Sounds something like this. Right? I'm already trying to fill in as much as I can with the strings. It's kind of a fine balance because you don't want to like fill in too much of one frequency area either. So for me, my thought process is like I'm trying to stay out of the range of the lead vocal. So if the lead vocal is singing around the middle C to the C above that, then the instrumentation should kind of be below that or above that. Like there can be some instruments in that same register, but just not too much and not too busy, or else it'll kind of detract from the lead vocal, you know? So I thought that was really important. That was the foundation of my arrangement there. And then the other elements I kind of started to put in were the drums, because that is one of the driving elements of any, you know, pop song that's rhythmic. So the basis for that was the drum kit here. Just have a listen to this. And this is from Cineperk. So see, I can find it here. Cineperk Pro. There we go, the drum kit right there. Has a nice punchy sound, and then I layered that in with some hits from Cymatics, just for a hip-hoppy sound, because the client wanted a type of Ariana Grande vibe that you usually get in her music. And so I added in those hi-hats as well. So again, if we hear it in the second chorus, you know, I tried to vary up the pattern slightly so it wasn't always the same, as you can see. Put some on the syncopated beats, right? Throw in some other hits here and there. Right, so that layered in with the orchestral elements, I think just has a nice hybrid sound. So talking about orchestral percussion, however, the very common ones are like timpani, bass drum, snare drum, things like that. So I went with cymbals. Instead of using traditional riser hits like in the trailers, I went with cymbals. So have a listen to this. Grow, and then a hit, and then a crash cymbal hit like that. So in context, it sounds like this. Right? Now I did put in a riser there as well, though, from Rise and Hit from Native Instruments. You know? So that's there too. that gives it that modern flair as well. But it's just a combination of orchestral and hybrid elements or electronic elements that I think makes it gel together quite nicely. Something else I put in are these measured tremolos in the strings. So have a listen to this. So it kind of has like a 16th note pattern. So it makes the rhythm even faster, or feels even more active in that way, you know, having those 16ths in there. And in addition to that, I've also put in some guitars. So I have the strum guitar on the left here, which sounds like this. In addition, I have an acoustic guitar doing strums as well on the right. You know, different types of strumming, playing different voicings of the chords, but I like having like two separate guitars doing slightly different things on either side, okay? And for the synth stuff, I use Elysian from Sonu Score and Best Service. So it kind of sounds like this. Just have a listen to the synth itself. Right, you can hear it's nice and gentle and light. In addition, I put in a couple piano sounds here as well. So it gives that kind of like tinkling, magical Disney type of sound, which I'm a huge fan of, so I do this quite a lot. Now, in the full context of the mix, you don't actually hear it that much, but like it it kind of gives a cool little color in the background, I think. Right, so I did say we have the strings doing the bulk of the work in the background for the texture, but some other elements here as well to fill it in even more. So we have the female vocals, we have women choir, another choir, where is it? Up here, choir there, and let's see. So I have a flute here as well, playing a nice line there. So that's my one woodwind in this song, to give it more of an orchestral touch. Passion strings we already talked about. The harp is also very lovely. I'll talk about that in a second. And that's pretty much it. So let's have a listen to what the choir sounds like. You hear the flute there on the top playing that nice high line. So this is in addition to the strings, right? As an added enhanced texture. And that harp is so beautiful, right? Like, usually you would have like trailer elements, like or some sorts of reverse hits or things like that to grow into your next section. But for me, I like to use the harp because it's a very natural and light sounding instrument. So, and I personally like to use them going into big climaxes or into new sections. So in this case, you can see I've put in a harp glissando going into the second chorus, into the second half of the chorus, and also going into the bridge, right? And then also ending off the bridge. Let's have a listen here.
Like popcorn on a string, singing that whole song right here.
Right, and I was trying to keep the elements going. So like right after I have this flute line over here, I have the harp, but then at the very top, I also have the sleigh bells as well, doing its little thing. You hear the ding, that tinkling there, so. Harp, sleigh bells, or, you know, bell tree. And then the sleigh bells continue. Of course, the classic Christmas sound. Tubular bells, which is like the church bell sound. I think that's a very cinematic tone. I love it. And then I have a timpani growing into the final chorus as well. With the riser, the cymbals, just everything coming together. Little bass line. I've also layered that in with a sine wave. So just to fill in that low end a little bit, because I actually don't have that many low end instruments in this production, so that was also really important for me to fill it in. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So in general, you'll see how the strings take up the bulk of the arrangement. And yeah, generally that's how it's going to be in most pop songs, that when you think an orchestral pop, you're usually thinking of strings because it's such a timeless sound and it gives us this nostalgic feeling. So I love using strings, both the short and the longer articulations, to really fill in the back, doing a lot of chordal textures, but also these nice rhythmic patterns that make the entire thing feel like it's flowing and, you know, there's excitement in it, right? I've thrown in the occasional woodwind, and I've of the flute, and then I've put in some French horn pads for extra thickness here. And I'm just using Cinnabrass, the 2 horns patch. And I love their poly legato function. It makes it really easy to use. So you hear the warmth. Right, so just additional warmth there, right? Which I love. And I have some occasional string runs in there as well, like doing scale runs up. So have a listen to this. Right, and then combining that with the harp sounds something like this. Right, so it's just like a match made in heaven. I love it. And of course I have the piano the whole time tinkling away. Or the celeste, right? And the piano here. Playing staccato chords in the top and then playing the bass line in the bottom. Notice how I'm avoiding the mid-range too much here. Like I'm sorry, not too much. I'm avoiding the mid-range because that's where the lead vocal is. That's where a lot of the instruments are residing. So a lot of the mix can be done for you if you arrange your instruments properly, actually. And this is especially something to take into account when you're working with orchestral instruments because they all have their specific frequency register, right? With string ensemble patches, for example, they can fill up the entire frequency spectrum. So you don't want to put everything in one patch right away because you kind of want to spread it out over different parts and see what works with the lead and what doesn't, So in this case, I've used short strings, but I've kind of spaced it out so the notes don't like overbear on the lead vocal. And in terms of the lead vocal, the client really wanted to hear the background vocals a little more, which meant I had to turn down the other orchestral instruments slightly to give them room, And yeah, that was really important for me. So let's just take a quick look at the processing. I prefer to do what's called top-down mixing. So I like to mix on the master fader or on the master bus first. Applied a little bit of directional mixer for mono mixing, a little bit. Then I threw on an EQ to take out some of the low end and a little bit of the mid-range boxiness there. A bit of a compressor to catch the absolute peaks, as you can see. So it's kind of hitting about, 0.5. It's compressing about that much, so I made up about that much as well. And the ratio isn't that high. It's just to, keep it in check a little bit. I love mix centric. I just applied a touch of it and it gives it some fairy dust on the mix, tightens it up slightly, little warmth with the tone centric, and then Onzo 9 elements at the very end, just to limit it and give it a little bit of extra polish. And then on these group tracks here, for the lead vox and the background vox, you can see I have very similar processing. The only difference is that on the background, I've actually added an extra reverb because without it, it sounds a little too upfront, right? But with a slightly more cinematic feel, which is larger than life, then we can apply some more space. But for the lead vocals, I wanted to use our Vox from Waves, beautiful compressor, just a classic compressor from Waves, from In Logic as a doubled compressor. Little de-esser there just to catch the S's. Right? And then a little bit of Greg Wells voice centric just to crisp it up a little bit more there as well. And then for drums, I had a lot of fun working on this because I compressed them first, so. Right? So just gives a little bit of a squeeze on the by 3 to 1. A little decapitator, this was a lot of fun. It gave it some crispiness to the drums. So turn it off. It's a little fuller. Turn it on. It's a little crispier, as you can hear. And then Valhalla Room for a little wetter sound. Hear how dry that is? But with a little bit of reverb, it sounds more cinematic for sure. And I like to be a little minimalistic with my plugins. Like I believe a lot of the work can be done in the arrangement phase. So even before you get to the mix, I think you should try to arrange it in a way where you minimize your mixing as much as possible. The only other plugins I've added extras on are on the actual vocal lead itself and where else? The ad-libs as well. So I put in the RVox again. Of course, I did some EQ to take out the lows, some of the mids here, and then boost the highs a touch. Our Voxic compressor again, 2 instances of Echo Boy, one for a quicker delay, one for slightly slower, and then a little extra reverb on that lead vocal itself. Now in this case, I brought it down to 0, so never mind, I turned that off. I think it's because I initially had more reverb on it, but then the client told me it sounded a little too wet, so then I just pulled it back totally. And I personally like how it sounds now as well. So there we go. That is my approach to an orchestral pop song. I really hope you enjoyed it and got a little bit out of it. As always, please check out the description box for my absolutely free guide. It's 3 components to an orchestral pop song that I think you should definitely keep in mind when you're working on any sort of pop song, let alone an orchestral type of song. But I talk about arrangement, I talk about keeping the lead vocal in focus and kind of like how to do that, and then also how to keep it interesting through dynamics. I think that's really key for an orchestra, because if you think of a real orchestra, performing in a live room, there's a lot of dynamics, there's a lot of contrast everywhere. So that's something we want to keep in mind, even though it's kind of a modern production. So personally, I feel those things are very important, and I just want to thank you for watching this video. It's my gift to you for checking this video out. Again, I want to thank Make Pop Music for having me on. It's always a pleasure. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below and I'll be more than happy to answer. I'll catch you in the next video and take care. Bye-bye.